Ready to start. Okay, so I'm here with my sister Andrea, and we're going to be talking about early intervention, and she works with special education. Andrea, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Okay. Hi, my name is Andrea Boykin, and I've been working in education since 2005. And I started working as a substitute teacher in K through 12th grade. And I did that for about 3 years, um, and on and off until I started working in the classroom in a special needs classroom. And I worked in that for a year, and then decided to go back to school to finish my bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in psychology, as well as my teaching certification in elementary um, education. And I've worked on and off in school, the school system in K through 12, doing um, math and reading intervention, as well as teaching first grade for a year in a public charter school. I taught kindergarten at a Christian school for a year. Right now, I am teaching special education as an instructional assistant at an elementary school that services preschool all the way to sixth grade. So that's just a little bit in a nutshell of the education experience that I've had.
Perfect. And so some of the questions I'm going to be talking about are in regard to special education and your the interventions that you do.
Okay.
So how do you support the diverse and racial, ethnic, linguistic, cultural experiences of the families of the students that you serve?
Okay. Well, like here in Western Kentucky, the racial and the ethnic background, the demographic is a lot different versus when I taught last year, first grade, in Houston, Texas. So one ways that I reached out to every of one of their family members, I had about 22 students in my class, and it was a bilingual class where I would teach the first group of students one day would be in English, and then my partner teacher would teach them in Spanish, and it was a trilingual school. So the we would have a Chinese teacher that would come in 3 days a week. But how we would reach out is we had to have a really strong system of communication with our parents, because we had ELL students, which is English language learners, that their English was not their first language. So we had huge Hispanic population of people that only spoke Spanish, or we had students that were study abroad students that came from China that only spoke Chinese. So we had to be very creative and very flexible with how we communicated with their parents. A lot of times we would just do phone calls, emails. We would communicate face to face. If a lot of times we'd have to have translators that were present. But really, there's no difference in people. You have to basically have a strong system in place, but just know that people are people, and as long as they know that we love and care for their students, we just broke down those cultural barriers and we were able to communicate effectively.
Perfect. So this next question has to do with your unconscious biases. And what do you do to recognize and address your unconscious biases against families and team members and partners in the community? So what do you do to recognize and address your own unconscious bias?
I think that a lot of times the ways that it comes up in the school system is when you're meeting with parents or when you're meeting with students. You have to realize that you're there to teach them, but also to protect them, to keep them safe. And if you have any unconscious biases that come up, you have to be able to put them down and go back to the basic hierarchy of needs, that you're making sure that you're meeting your social needs of the students, as well as that you're teaching them and you're not discriminating, or you're not. It was difficult for me because my son, I have two boys. My youngest son last year was in first grade, and he was in my cluster of classrooms. So he started off in my classroom, but I had asked that he would be moved to another one of my partner teachers' classrooms, just because I didn't want to have to be his mom as well as his teacher all in the same day. So I think you just have to set a system and a set of guidelines down. And if you start to hit the biases, the things that you have with your students, you have to, if you have a system in place, you'll have something to fall back on, that you can, your rules and your guidelines on how you're going to run your classroom and what you're going to do. And that way you try to treat people fairly and with respect.
Awesome. Very well put. So this next question, and I wasn't sure if I told you, but there's 7 questions total. And
okay.
Right now we're on question 3. So
okay.
We doing okay on time?
Yeah. Am I talking too much?
No, you're awesome, Ange.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So this next question has to do with theoretical concepts. And so what are some of the theoretical concepts that influence your partnerships with families and other team members and partners in the community?
Okay. These are some strong questions, so that's good. So some of the concepts that I look at is I'm actually reading 2 books right now, and one is called What Great Teachers Do Differently, and it's 14 things that matter most. And another book I'm reading is called The Excellent 11. It's by Ron Clark, and it's qualities that teachers and parents use to motivate, inspire, and educate children to change the world. So some of the things that I have been following is some of these principles from these books that I'm reading. And just basically, like in Ron Clark's Excellent 11, you have to have a sense of enthusiasm, adventure, creativity, reflection, balance, compassion, confidence, humor, common sense, appreciation, and resilience. And that's just kind of things in a nutshell. But if you have those qualities, then you can better not only just teach your students, and especially with special education, because you're dealing with a lot of behavioral students, you're dealing with a lot of developmental concerns from not only the family, but as well as the students. So you have to know how to bridge those gaps. And if you can bridge those gaps, you're going to teach not only your general population of students, but your special ed students, that they have a purpose, and that they are worthy, and that they are capable of learning. And if you can teach them those things, you can not only motivate and inspire and educate them, but you can actually teach them that they can change the world.
That is awesome, Andrea. Thank you. So
yes.
This next question has to do with community resources.
This is something that is so such my heartbeat, because my husband and I, we've been in the ministry as well as educators for the last, I've been in education since 2005, but he's taught for the last 6 or 7 years. So I've gotten a little bit longer than him, but he's still been a little bit in education, because we've worked in youth ministry and social ministries, and just we've done missionaries just traveled a lot of places around the world. He has specifically, but we've done it together as a family. But some of the things that has helped us. Amy, can you rephrase that last part of the question?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you use community resources
Community resources.
to support these families?
To support the families. Okay, so this is what you basically have to do. You have to know your students first. So obviously, especially in special need classrooms, because they're going to need a whole lot more one-on-one attention and care, and they're going to have a whole lot more social, emotional, behavioral needs versus someone in the general classroom. So you have to know your students well, and how you know your students well is you have a system of trust that you've developed with their parents, because their parents want to know that their children are being treated fairly, but also they're learning and they're in a safe environment, and that they're not going to have worries or concerns about them. So if you can establish that with the student, then you can pull in the community. You can pull in community resources. I work right now this year, especially with us. I was just at the school today, Sedalia Elementary in Mayfield, Kentucky. I was just there getting resources today and working with our special ed instructional coach, pulling together resources for our sweet students that are homebound right now. And just getting some more things together so that we can provide them with the resources they need. But I work with our community-based coordinator at our school. Every school in Graves County, which is the county I live in Mayfield, Kentucky, has a community resource liaison, or somebody that represents the community within the school. And we work with them. So like if we have specific needs, like if students need school supplies, if they need food, if they need clothing, if their parents, like we've had 2 or 3 students, this is really tragic, but they lost everything in a house fire recently this year. We've had 3 different families, and it usually doesn't happen in the same school, but for some reason it has. So we were able to work together with the community resource department and make sure that these children had food and clothing, as well as education resources at home. So I think that's what matters most, is that you connect with the kids and you develop that system of trust with their parents, and then keep the lines of communication open with them. That way, if they have a specific need, you can target and meet that need.
Yes, that is wonderful. I'm actually going to pull out the supper.
Oh, go ahead,
so
Amy.
It doesn't burn real quick. And then we're more than halfway done.
Good. You're being the good wife there at home.
Yes, I just didn't want it to burn. Oh, okay. All right. So we are on question, that was question 4. So we're more than halfway. Just got to sprinkle the cheese on top of this and let it sit while we finish this up here. Okay.
You're multitasking. That's wonderful.
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. So question 5 is... Oh, let me make sure I turn the oven off real quick. Oven. Okay, oven's off. All right, here we go. Question 5. Oh, let's see. Question 5. This has to do with strategies, partnership strategies. How do you assess the effectiveness of partnership strategies with the families and the team members and partners in the community? So you basically addressed that a lot when you talked about like taking care of the needs of the children.
Yes.
But how do you assess it? The effectiveness.
How do you do what? Say that again.
Sorry. How do you assess?
Oh, how do you assess it? Okay. So how you assess it, or how do you see if what you're doing is working?
Yes.
You just base it on the child. So if you've met their hierarchy of needs. So if the child is hungry, if you've fed them, if if they don't have resources at home, like maybe they don't have the internet, or they're not able to do research online because they don't have a flip phone, or a cell phone. I'm not a flip phone, a smartphone, or they don't have the resources they need. You just have to communicate. You have to go back and reassure them that you're going to help them get those resources. And so one way you can assess them is just by asking them the questions. But you have to be so sensitive, because sometimes that's embarrassing to a child. So sometimes it may require one-on-one interaction with them. It may require just watching them, looking at their grades, seeing if you can find any patterns developing. Or one thing that I loved is when I taught in Texas, we would have breakfast in the classroom every day, and it kind of defeated the stigma, because some kids, when I was in school, if we got free lunch or free breakfast, but it was kind of a stigma thing, like it meant you were low income. At the school I taught in Texas, it was a Title I school, so everyone, it doesn't matter if you come from a wealthy family, or if you were just doing your best and your parents were trying to make ends meet and just weren't doing what someone else was doing. It didn't matter. Everyone got breakfast. So that was kind of a good thing, because if my babies, I call home my babies, my students, if they were hungry and they ate, they always did better on their tests. They always did better on their classwork. And so I always had to make sure those basic needs were met. So you just have to really be conscious and aware. If you feel like it's going to embarrass your students, don't ask them. Just watch them and observe them. Be a good monitor and just take note. Like, I would always have a file on every student. And if something wasn't right and maybe I couldn't contact their parent at that moment, I would write it in their file. I would say, so-and-so looks like they're having a bad day. Or I may pull them to the side and say, are you doing okay today? Is there anything that you need? What's wrong? And most, like 9 times out of 10, they would just tell me exactly what's going on. And they might just need a hug. You just never know what somebody's going through. So I think if you have just a system in place where you're able to check in with your students, but also monitor them so you're not going to embarrass them. And if your kids, good teachers know their kids. Mm-hmm. And they know if something is not right, or, if they need to check on them. So I think that's important to have that in place.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Andrea. That was very well put. Okay, so we have 2 more questions. This next question has to do with problem solving and resolving conflict with families.
Okay.
So how do you problem solve and resolve conflict with families, other team members and partners in the community?
I think problem solving with the parents or people in the community, like, it goes back to your filing system. If you have if you have a chart on each student, like, I would always keep 3 sets of work for each student, like work from the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and the end of the year. So each kid would have their own file and chart. And anytime we would have a parent-teacher conference, I would just pull their file and just sit down with their parents or community people, whoever needed to be involved in the meeting. And just, I would always be professional and kind to the students and to their parents and welcome them to the meeting. And then I'll let them voice whatever their concern was, and just have them take as much time as they need, because a lot of times if somebody's upset, you need to respect their time and give them time. So then once they addressed whatever it was that they were concerned about, I would always have a notepad with me, because I would take notes, because sometimes parents, for whatever reason, they're only thinking one-sided about their own student. They're not thinking about everything that may or may not have happened. So if you jot down these notes. You can always put it back in the file that you have documented it. But 9 times out of 10, we always were able to talk it out and work it out together. And once the parents saw both sides of the story, if they were right or if I was right or if I was wrong and they were wrong, whatever it was, we were able to come to a compromise. And we were able to figure out, hey, this is what I need to work on. This is what he or she needs to work on. This is how we're going to learn and get better. So you just kind of talk it out. But if you have that file with you, it looks very professional, but it also shows that, wow, this teacher really cares and they want what's best for my student.
That's good. Okay, this last question has to do with any recommendations. So are there any recommendations that you have for working effectively with families in the community?
I would definitely recommend, like, especially for if you're a new teacher, or even if you've been teaching for 20 plus years, always have people that you can look up to, or somebody that can mentor you. Like, I always had a principal that I could go to and talk to, or I had different administrators or teachers that have taught for a number of years, or even had teachers that only taught a few years, because they would teach me the new things. Like, there's some new techniques that are coming up that we're learning, and even in college that may be unheard of to a teacher that's taught 20, 30 years. So I've tried to have a balance of teachers with experience versus teachers that are just new and upcoming, because I could pull nuggets from each person and learn from them.
Yes.
So I would say surround yourself with people that are going to help you grow and help you thrive and be the best teacher that you can be.
Awesome.
So whether you're teaching special education or whether you're teaching in the general education.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to end the recording.
Good, and have a great supper too, Aim.
Yes, wait, don't get off the phone yet.
Okay.